The Stone Roses' self-titled debut album released in 1989 is a landmark record in the pantheon of British rock music, blending psychedelic pop, danceable rhythms and swagger and attitude into a record that helped ignite the Manchester scene and set the stage for all that followed in the 90s phenomenon that was dubbed Britpop. By the time the sessions for the album began in 1988, the Stone Roses had already spent several years cycling through lineups, early singles, and even a scrapped first album, slowly moving from darker post-punk roots towards a brighter, melodic guitar sound. Tracks like Sally Cinnamon and Elephant Stone had hinted at their future direction, pairing chiming guitars with groove-led rhythms, giving them a cult reputation around Manchester. When they finally secured an album deal with Silvertone, the band arrived at the studio with songs that had been road-tested live, but still rough in structure and feel, needing a producer to shape them into a cohesive record. Bassist Manny suggested producer John Leckie, after admiring his work with psychedelic-leaning acts like XTC and Dukes of Stratosphere. They hoped he could capture the band's mix of classic pop and trippy atmospheres. Leckie took on the project and oversaw sessions primarily at Battery Studios in London, with additional work at Conch Studios, Rockfield Studios in Wales, and other locations as scheduling and circumstances shifted. The record was tracked over several months from mid-1988 to early 1989, allowing time to refine arrangements, experiment with sounds, and avoid simply bashing out live takes. Elephant Stone actually preceded the album's sessions, having been recorded with Peter Hook at his own studio in January 1988, and then later mixed by Leckie. Leckie recalled that the band were all well rehearsed and very confident, but that the material initially ran too fast, with excess reverb on Ian Brown's vocals and loose structures that needed tightening. He slowed tempos and helped the group build intros and outros so the songs felt more like carefully composed pieces rather than extended jams. Crucially, he often waited to roll tape until the band could perform with assurance, focusing on feel and arrangement before committing anything to the multitrack. Leckie remembers, John Squire always had his Fostex 16-track recorder in the tape cupboard at the back of the studio. After we'd gone home, he would sit there with headphones and work out all his parts. He always did that, right through Fool's Gold, up until the second album. In fact, part of the reason for the breakdown of that second album was that John would sit in his bedroom with the Fostex, while the rest of us waited in the studio for his guitar parts. He wouldn't improvise or make something up in the studio, but he got to the stage where he was really good. For instance, on Bye Bye Badman, there's a guitar that plays all the way through, a kind of counter lead line going through a Leslie, and I remember him playing that in about half an hour. However, we had to wait 4 days for that before he came out of the cupboard. The Fostex was also responsible for Don't Stop, which evolved from the 16-track demo of Waterfall being played backwards. The album was recorded to 2 synchronized Studer 24-track machines, allowing generous layers of guitars, vocals and effects without crowding the basic drums and bass. Tape was run at 30 inches per second without Dolby noise reduction, favouring clarity and transient detail over extra noise suppression, which also contributed to the record's crisp high-end and punchy drums. These studios, of course, had the latest large format consoles such as SSLs and Tridents, so onboard EQ combined with classic outboard compressors and reverbs helped to shape the mix. These included Pultecs for tonal shaping, DBX 160s and URI 1176 compressors to control dynamics, and digital reverb such as Oasis Midiverb 2 and Lexicon PCM60 for ambience. The PCM60 reportedly became a signature of Ian Brown's vocals, helping them to sit in a dreamlike space without losing intelligibility, while the Midiverb 2's character contributed to the intimate, lazy room feel on tracks like Shoot You Down. The rhythmic foundation of the album is drummer Rennie's fluid, swinging feel, which draws from shuffle patterns reminiscent of John Densmore's work with The Doors and broader funk influences. Leckie treated the drums as central, trying multiple kit drums and snares to match each song's character. Rennie's own kit at the time was a hybrid of different bits and pieces, but centered around a Gretsch kick drum and Ludwig snare, although he often returned to a smaller Noble and Cooley snare that cut through the mix while still sounding warm and musical. The kit was mic'd up with a Shure SM57 on the snare, AKG D12 and sometimes a Sennheiser 421 for the kick, adding weight and definition. Neumann U87s and Sennheiser 421s on the toms, and an AKG 451 on the hi-hat, with room and overhead mics delivering the airy stereo image. On some tracks, Leckie layered kick and snare samples triggered via an AMS DMX 1580, even using backwards copies of the live hits, adding subtle reinforcement and character rather than overtly synthetic sounds. Manny's bass was his painted Rickenbacker 4005, initially through a Laney rig, before settling into an Ampeg SVT, providing both round low end and the growl needed to cut through dense guitar layers. His only pedal apart from a tuner was the Boss LMB3 bass limiter enhancer. An AKG D12 was used on the bass cabinet along with a DI, blending clarity and low frequency punch to maintain definition even as they drift into reverberant psychedelia. John Squire's sound is of course central to the album's identity, blending jangly pop riffs with bluesy lead lines and textural overdubs that more than hint at 60s psychedelic rock. His main guitar while playing live at the time was his 1964 Gretsch Country Gentleman with Supertron pickups and a Hofner T2S. When he initially started to track the Gretsch, Leckie wasn't all that impressed with the sound, which led to Squire trying out a pink 62 Fender Stratocaster, hired in through the rental company Dream Hire. This Strat ended up being all over the album, as Squire eventually fell in love with it, later purchasing the guitar from Dream Hire, as he couldn't bear to let it go. His main amp was the 1982 Fender Twin Reverb with the orange JBL 120Fs. His pedals included a Dallas Arbiter Fuzz Face, TS9 Tube Screamer, Gem Wah pedal, Boss PH2 Super Phaser, and Boss BF2 Flanger. Leckie preferred to mic the guitar cabinet with a Shure SM57 or often an SM58, sometimes complemented by a Neumann U67, placing them close to the grille and slightly off-center of the speaker cone, and relied heavily on double tracking to give Squire's parts their enveloping width. Ian Brown's vocals became a defining feature of the record. Leckie frequently recorded Brown using a Shure SM58, sometimes with the singer in the control room rather than the live room, creating a relaxed environment that helps capture more natural takes. His understated delivery, combined with reverb and delays, allowed his voice to float inside the mix like another instrument, rather than sitting in front in a typical rock fashion. Rennie's all-important backing vocals were also recorded using the same mic setup, Leckie said. Rennie was a great harmonizer, but he wanted to sing on everything. Ian would say, "Can we turn Rennie down?" Ian thought that the harmonies sounded too 60s. With everything recorded, the running order then became a consideration. Leckie recalls, "We always knew I Want to Be Adored would start, and I'm the Resurrection would end it. But once we had the whole running order, we realised, wow, that's good." Leckie struggled to mix it at first, too many opinions in the control room and a lack of perspective, until he later remixed it largely alone, showing how the Roses' collaborative but strong-willed personalities could both fuel creativity but complicate decisions. Leckie said, "Of course, John and Ian hated the record. They said the drums and bass weren't loud enough, and the guitar needed to be more devastating. But they'd been playing Public Enemy in the studio the whole time, full blast." Although not featured on the original release, the single Fool's Gold is very much part of the band's story at the time. It was recorded slightly later at Sawmill Studio in Cornwall while working on a new single. The track was built around a loop of Clyde Stubblefield's famous funky drummer break, loaded into an Akai S1000 and sequenced in early Cubase software, over which the band layered live instruments. Manny's bass line was adopted from the Young MC's track Know How, saying that he heard it whilst clubbing looking for things to pinch. Upon its 1989 release, the Stone Roses' debut was not an immediate blockbuster, but quickly gained momentum in tandem with the band's legendary live shows, such as the Blackpool Ballroom gig. The mythical Spike Island concert was the must-see event of the year, which really helped spread their image as the coolest kids in town. With their rhythms clearly informed by club culture and acid house, it was heralded as something new and vibrant. The record's critical standing has grown continually, appearing high on numerous greatest albums lists, and frequently being cited as a key influence on 90s Britpop bands who admired its blend of swagger and melodic finesse. The album perfectly captures a brief moment in time when it felt like the Roses were about to conquer the world, Sadly for the band, that never quite happened. But their legacy, as one of the greatest British guitar bands, is very much secured. If you'd like to see more videos about the recording process involved in creating these classic albums, then you can support this channel by using my affiliate links in the description. This is a great way to do it, as you don't have to pay a thing, and I get a small percentage if you buy anything. Thank you in advance for your help.